98% sugar. Maple syrup, 65% sugar. Xylitol, 68% sugar. Xylitol is out of a birch tree rather than maple. Agave syrup is the worst. Agave syrup is not ever raw. It's cooked always to at least 180 degrees. And when it's tested by 2 independent labs, not salespeople, basically show that it creates more diabetic and high blood sugar conditions than anything else. So right through into the pancreatic function. Stay away from agave syrup. And so you've got to watch. We are sugar addicts. There's not one of us in this room that are not sugar addicts. There's two kinds of us. Recovering sugar addicts and active sugar addicts. We're all sugar addicts. And so whatever, we'll try everything in the world. That's why you go to the health store and we show you that 85% of what's there is garbage. Because it always starts with the first ingredient is what? Sugar. Second ingredient, fat. Third ingredient, salt. They know that that's what we're addicted to. They're addicted. And then you have these half-wits that don't know anything about chemistry. They're saying, oh, well, you need to take X amount of this stuff. You don't need a thing. You need a salad to get all the carbohydrate sugars you need in the day. You don't need to eat fruit to get carbohydrate sugar. Look at gorillas. Realize pound for pound, gorillas are the strongest creatures on the planet. They can pick a 200-pound man up, lift him, throw him out to the front of this building with one arm. What do they do it on? Greens and sprouts. In the wild, they take the plant out, clean the bottom off, and eat the sprout of the plant. Why? That's where the nutrients are. So, do we like this? Yes. Do I still like it? Yes. Just can't eat it. I know one thing. I opened up, my buddy and I, when we used to share a house when I was at university, I used to go nuts on this. I had to have open mouth gallon jars. Why? Because we'd use a gallon of honey a week. A week. And I'd be taking, of course, whole wheat bread, sticking my whole arm in there, and say, oh, this is so good, And that Saturday we were throwing away the bottle and getting another bottle. That's what happens with addiction. Now, what's the good part of honey? Which I'm a big fan of. Pollen. Pollen is amazing. Every year we discover new things in pollen. I've been looking at it. There's a doctor I work with indirectly out of France. It's brilliant. He's found out the curative effect of certain flower pollen. So you get from this pollen, this affects diabetes. This pollen affects cancer. This pollen affects depression. And he's actually doing the research over in the south of France now. So pollen I'm a big fan of, not the honey. Yes. DHA comes beautifully from things like chia seeds, like these. Sprouted flax, don't ever just take flax. You have them sprouted, and you can buy them sprouted, dried, and ground, and it's digestible. Hemp seed, to some level, walnut oil, etc. Now, the fish oil industry has done a canning job on lying to you and saying that you don't convert to DHA. I have never eaten a fish in 41 years, raised 4 kids, never eaten any animal food. Not one of us has ever been on DHA. It's belonging. Just like a fish takes a plant called the sea vegetable and an algae and converts it to their body wheat. In my new book, Killer Fish, that's right there, I quote study after study after study after study. And anyone here at this university or anyone in the world that wants to debate it, I'll debate it. And the reality is we'll win. This is overwhelming evidence. I will also say fish oil is a carcinogen. I'll say eating fish is heavy metal contamination, chemical contamination. I can't think of a better way to get you sick. Neuron diseases, right down to cancer. I can't not think of a better way. And there's no clean fish on the planet. And we put it as clear as I can. That the two most significantly well-respected oceanographic scientists, one from Sweden, one from Canada, went out to say, is there any clean water left on the planet? They looked at the 250 cleanest bodies of water. Brooks, lakes, North Pole, South Pole, Lapland. Every one of the 250 had plastic, EPA, which is the elasticity test, 100%. Every one of them had pharmaceutical. Every one of them had fluoride. This is thousands and thousands of miles away from where people live. We're not talking about Florida. We're talking about thousands of miles. This is deadly bad stuff. You've got to not compromise. I cannot say this loud enough. We are in a radically bad position at this point, and everyone's sleeping. Why is it that my organization can reverse catastrophic disease at the top hospital in the world can? Why is it that I'm telling you things you never heard? Fish bath, water needs to have stuff. How come this is the first time any of you have heard about it? Why isn't this on national television in every country every single night until we get it to our heads? Why aren't you told that most health people are drunk? Why? Because Everyone wants to be moderate, everyone wants to compromise, everyone wants to take baby steps, and nobody really wants to do what it takes to survive. Today we're in a position where we're against the wall, the guns are out, we're ready to talk. And the truth of the matter is, if we don't learn to stand up straight and start talking right and doing the right thing, we're not going to survive. And I'm not saying this is a threat, but I'm an optimist. I think we're in a pinnacle place in human history that we can swing right back to what's right. And I think it has to get so damn bad that people have to realize it. People are waking up. When I travel the globe, this year I've been in 32 countries. I see a major shift in countries. There used to be certain kinds of people who come to my lecture 20, 30 years. Everyone. Because everyone's dying, everyone's sick, everyone's children have disease. Their wives have just died. Their neighbors are dying. There's certain neighborhoods where I walk in the neighborhood with people and say, that woman had cancer, that man had cancer, but every other house. And that, you realize cancer used to be 2 to 3% 100 years ago. The population today is 50%. And the number one killer are babies or children. You know that. Anyone there?
Past couple of years I've been vegetarian. I've had a broad diet for a couple of weeks past few months. And, I actually recently bought a home distiller. Doesn't take from the air, but I fill it with tap water. Yeah. Comes like $200.
They're not much.
Also, there's an athlete, small there's an athlete, raw vegan athlete, and he has a book called Fried Foods.
Brennan,
And he really does, the glucose dates and like maple cinnamon bars and dates and like sugars, like you're saying you don't need that.
We certainly don't. And again, Brendan's a new scientist. He's not a doctor, not a scientist. He's a good guy. Doing what he does. He gets on a bicycle, not like me, and goes 30 miles a day. You're going to burn off a lot. You're sitting on your butt behind the desk all day long. We may dream about burning off. It's not going to be open. But we got to get off, again, the fruits right away. Because all fruits are picked on right. Even the organic. So you cannot pick fruit right. If you pick fruit right with a rotten back, rotten box. So all unripe fruit is highly acid. Well, if you rob minerals from your bones and your cartilage, I couldn't do it better than the unripe fruit. Number two, you need to remineralize. You need to take some supplementation. And supplementation you need to get tomorrow is at every health store. It's called BioSil. B-I-O-S-I-L. BioSil silica, that's 2.5 times more absorbable than most of the farming market. It's amazing. Second is biotin. B-I-O-T-I-N. Totally different. Third is strong meat. These are the things that you need. MSM. Don't take it every day. Don't taste it every day. Take it every other day. MSM is a sulfur. It's like a domino effect. It does bad things to the other day. And then you have to start to move and exercise and everything. If you don't do that, that's what it is. You all hear over there? Let me repeat the questions. Excuse me.
How do you suggest getting B12?
Okay, starting about 14 years ago, I'll tell you a story. We were over in Wales doing a major raw food conference, and the last of the 4 days, there were all of wheat quote authorities on the stage, and several of the people said, we're very confused, because you said this, she said this, they said that. So I committed to holding summits for the leaders of raw food, and we had 3 down at Hippocrates here in Florida. And in the first one, my buddy Gabriel Cousins and George Malcolmus were sitting on each side of me, and they said, did you see the Framingham study? And when somebody says to a Dr. Framingham, we get on our knees and kiss the earth. They're one of the few people that nobody fights with. They were the ones who created our understanding of cholesterol. They do impeccable research in a little area outside of Boston, Harvard-related, called Framingham. And they had just done a study on blood tests, which we were the come-to place. When anyone in the world from a university or a doctor wanted to know how a good vegan diet didn't require B12 supplements, they called Hippocrates. Because we had thousands and thousands of blood tests saying that you got B12 on a proper raw food diet. Not a high fruit, not a cooked diet, but proper.
And they said, you know, they looked at the blood test and they were saying the people had B12. Then they did urine tests and found that they didn't have B12. Now this stunned me, because when they said Framingham, it wasn't the local junior college. So I read the study within that day, that night, and I started to recognize that when I brought in a very sophisticated test, the most important one in nutrition called the SpectraCell test, I would see on the medical blood test that said people had B12. On the SpectraCell, they had no B12. And now, 14 years later, we recognize 70% of the population lacks B12. Meat eaters have 7 to 8% higher incidence of B12 deficiency than vegans do. But vegans do, vegetarians do, lacto-ovo fish eaters do. And why? So this was perplexing to me. And I became like a zealot for 3 years. And thank God I have a buddy up at Harvard and one at NYU, and he used to sneak me into the medical library. I sat there on and off, not every day, but 10 times one year, 20 times the next year, 8 times the next, and finally got it. We looked at books going back literally hundreds of years ago, sketchings of the intestinal tract. Now why? B12 is actually a soil-based microorganism. It's a healthy bacteria. It's not a B vitamin. When we discovered B12, we didn't know what a probiotic was, so we improperly, back in the 20th century, put it into the B category. But it's a soil-based microorganism. Where does it reside? In the gastrointestinal tract. So I'm starting to look at hundreds of years ago sketchings of the intestinal tract, and they look radically different than they do now. I don't have something to draw here tonight, but you can get on my website and look at an article I did on this. And we used to have at the bottom of the intestinal tract something that looked like the front of a boot that had no foot in it. So you would see the ileocecal valve coming from the small intestine, where the digested food would come down, pop down and go into this front of the boot and ferment there, culturing this bacteria. Guess what? That's gone. Over the last several hundred years, that disappeared. And what we have there now is a blunt end with an appendix that's all shriveled up. So there's no place for B12 to culture itself in. So no matter what you eat, this is the one supplement we strongly advise everyone to take. Again, meat eaters, fish eaters, dairy eaters have as much, if not more, B12 deficiency. Why? Because we don't eat raw meat. You know, how does meat get B12? From the soil. The beaks of a chicken, the teeth of a cow are on the soil all day long. When's the last time your teeth have been on the soil? You follow me? And so they take these poor animals, slaughter them, freeze them, kill them. You think it has bacteria in it? And we're not suggesting to eat uncooked meat. I shouldn't call it raw because there's no such thing as raw meat. To call something alive, it has to have electromagnetic frequency. So if you hooked a piece of steak up or sushi to an EKG, it would flatline. You'd have no life force in it. So you'd be eating decomposing flesh. No, we're not suggesting that. We're suggesting when you do this long enough, you most likely will not have a B12 deficiency. But those of us who are serious about this, we tell you to take a bacterial form of B12 on a daily basis. 9 out of 10 on the market are methyls, which are alcohol, not a good one. You need a SIO that's a bacterial form. We're not big fans of water fast since the overwhelming majority of the public is malnourished to begin with. But we're major advocates of juice fasting on green juices, wheatgrass, water, etc. I've been fasting for 40 years, 2 days a week now. So I stopped eating on Tuesday nights and started eating on Thursday nights again. I think fasting is a major, major part of staying young, staying without disease, etc. Fasting is as important as eating. But I'm not a big fan of water fasting because when I was running centers in Europe, I started to notice what happened when you put even healthy people on water fast. And with the blood sugar problems the way they are, not a good idea. If you give a sustainable, high-protein green juice, major protein in these juices, they're made of sprouts. It's going to sustain, stabilize blood sugar, make you healthy, and clean you at a better level. Yes? Nitro oxide. Taking it, or are you? Oh, the Synergy. The Synergy product. Synergy product's an excellent product. That's made by Mitchell May. And Mitchell May was actually dismembered in an automobile accident in Louisiana back in the 1970s. And his parents were professors at the University of California. They were told he was